Under a blazing crimson sunset, a lone traveler steps onto the edge of an endless outback plain. The cicadas hum like a heartbeat, wind carrying the scent of rain that may never fall. He carries nothing but a battered journal and a secret that has chased him across deserts and decades. In the rust-red dust lie choices that could mend a family or break generations to come. This is a journey of grit, heartbreak, and redemption, where one decision will teach the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the smallest act of courage changes everything. The red dust begins. The late afternoon sky over the Kimberley burned a fierce orange, the kind of glow that made the spinifex shimmer like gold wire. Jack Moran tightened the straps of his pack and shaded his eyes. 32 years old and lean as a stockman's whip, he'd left Darwin 2 days earlier with nothing but a rail ticket, a battered leather journal, and a decision gnawing at his chest. Every step into the red dust felt like stepping further from the life he'd abandoned. Behind him were the bright offices of Perth, his father's law firm, the cold arguments about duty and family name. Ahead lay silence, the endless stretch of desert where no one cared who he was or what fortune he'd turned his back on. The bus driver, an older bloke with sun-cracked skin, had warned him as he stepped off at the roadhouse. "Watch yourself out here, mate. The land doesn't forgive fools." Jack had only nodded. He wasn't chasing forgiveness. He was chasing something he couldn't yet name. Hours of walking brought him to a dry creek bed where ancient gums leaned like weary sentinels. The air smelt of iron and dust, and cicadas screamed their endless chorus. He dropped his pack and sat, rubbing grit between his fingers. For the first time since quitting the firm, he felt the sharp edge of loneliness. From the west, a shimmer of movement caught his eye. A woman approached along the dry channel, boots kicking up little spirals of dust. She carried a canvas bag and walked with a steady, unhurried rhythm. When she drew close, Jack saw she was older, mid-40s maybe, skin bronzed by years under the sun, eyes the clear gray of a storm over the sea. "Evening," she said, voice low and calm. "Not often I see strangers this far off the track." "Needed a bit of space," Jack replied, suddenly aware of how thin his reason sounded. The woman studied him, as if weighing his words against the silence of the land. "Space can swallow a man if he's not careful." She dropped her bag and crouched, brushing dust from her knees. "Name's Mara. I keep a camp a few k's north. You're welcome to share a fire if you've no plan for the night." Jack hesitated. Pride urged him to refuse, but the sky was darkening fast and the temperature had already begun to fall. "I'd appreciate that," he admitted. They walked together as the first stars needled through the twilight. Mara spoke little, letting the crunch of boots on sand fill the gaps. When they reached her camp, just a ring of stones around a small pit, she set a billy over the flames and handed him a tin mug. The tea was strong and smoky. "So," she said at last, "what's a city fellow really doing out here alone?" Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. How to explain the suffocating boardrooms, the endless arguments with his father about mergers and family legacy? How to confess he'd walked away from wealth most people only dreamed of because it felt like a cage? "I'm looking for something honest," he said finally. Mara watched the firelight dance across his face. "Honest is a heavy word. The country'll show you truths, but they won't always be gentle." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant rain. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Then Myra spoke again, her voice softer. "I once walked away from everything too. Thought I'd find freedom out here. Instead, the land taught me what I'd been running from wasn't the world, it was myself." Jack stared into the flames, her words striking a nerve he hadn't known was exposed. Above them, the Milky Way unfurled like a silver river. Somewhere in that vast quiet, the lesson of the red dust had begun, though Jack could not yet see its shape. Echoes of the land. Morning came cold and startlingly clear. Jack woke to the smell of damp earth, the faint promise of rain threading through the outback air. Mara was already up, stirring the embers and humming a tune so old it felt woven into the land itself. "You sleep all right, city bloke?" she asked without looking up. "Better than I have in months," Jack admitted. The honesty surprised him. Mara poured tea into 2 battered mugs. "Good. We've a fair walk to my homestead if you're keen. There's a storm brewing from the east. Best to be under a roof before it hits." Jack slung on his pack and fell in beside her. The country stretched wide and silent, except for the crunch of their boots. Red sand gave way to pale spinifex plains where kangaroos bounded in the distance. The rising sun painted everything in copper and gold. As they walked, Myra began to speak, slowly at first, as if each word needed weighing. "Used to be a teacher," she said. "Darwin, had a classroom full of bright-eyed kids and a house by the sea. Then my partner drowned in a cyclone. After that, the city noise just felt wrong. So I packed up, came out here." Jack listened, the rhythm of her story syncing with the steady beat of their steps. "Did the country fix it?" he asked. Myra gave a short laugh. "The land doesn't fix. It shows you what's broken, what can't be mended, and what's worth the fight." They reached a ridge where the world dropped away into a valley of ghost gums. Below, a narrow creek glittered in the early light. Myra stopped, gaze sweeping the horizon. "This place," she said quietly, "has a way of testing whether you're honest with yourself. If you're not, it will break you." Jack felt the truth of her words settle like weight on his chest. He thought of the boardroom deals he'd orchestrated, the hollow victories, the arguments with his father about keeping the Moran name powerful. None of it felt real out here. By midday, the wind picked up, carrying the metallic scent of an approaching storm. Clouds stacked dark and bruised above the hills. When the first fat drops fell, they quickened their pace, reaching Mayra's homestead, a modest timber cabin tucked against a sandstone bluff. Just as the sky split open. Inside, the air smelt of eucalyptus and wood smoke. Mayra moved with practiced ease, lighting a lamp, laying out bread and cheese. Jack watched her, struck by the quiet steadiness she carried. "Place is solid," he said. "Built it with my own hands," she replied. "Taught me patience, muscle by muscle. Same way the land teaches." They ate in companionable silence while the storm raged. Rain hammered the roof like a drum, and Jack felt a calm he hadn't known in years. Here there were no deadlines, no shareholders, only the raw truth of weather and wood and the human need for shelter. When the downpour eased, Myra turned to him, eyes sharp. "You didn't come here just to wander." "What's chasing you, Jack?" He hesitated, then let the words spill. The endless push to expand his father's firm, the expectation to marry into a family of equal wealth, the gnawing sense that none of it belonged to him. "I walked out. No plan. Just couldn't breathe anymore." Myra studied him for a long moment. "Sometimes running is the first honest thing we do, but running's only half the journey. Sooner or later you have to face what you left." Jack stared at the fire, her words echoing louder than the fading storm. Outside, the land exhaled steam into the cooling dusk. The scent of rain-washed soil rose like a benediction. For the first time, Jack wondered if the lesson he'd come seeking wasn't hidden in the vast emptiness at all, but waiting inside himself. The weight of silence. The Kimberley morning broke soft and pale, the air washed clean by the night storm. Jack stepped outside the cabin to a world that smelt of wet stone and eucalyptus. Puddles mirrored the wide sky, and somewhere a kookaburra burst into sudden laughter, as if mocking the quiet. Mayra joined him with 2 mugs of steaming tea. "Best time of day," she said, handing him one. "Before the flies remember we exist." They sat on the veranda rail, watching the light slide across the valley. Jack felt a rare stillness. No phone buzzed, no urgent email demanded his name. Only the land, vast and indifferent. "You thinking of heading back soon?" Mayra asked. Jack shook his head. "Can't imagine the city right now." "City's not the enemy," she said gently, "but you can't hide here forever either." Her words landed heavier than the morning air. Jack hadn't meant to stay, he'd only meant to run. Yet the thought of returning to Perth tightened his chest like a closing fist. Later that day, Mayra suggested a walk to the old Stockman's Trail that wound along the escarpment. The track was rough, dotted with loose shale. They moved in near silence, the only sound their boots crunching and the distant cry of a wedge-tailed eagle. At a lookout, Mayra stopped. Below them stretched an ocean of red cliffs and silver-green scrub, endless and wild. "Beautiful," Jack said. "Beautiful and brutal," Mayra replied. "This land will strip you bare. That's its gift." Jack let the words sink in. The view felt like a mirror, majestic, unyielding, impossible to own. As they turned back, a question burned on his tongue. "Mayra, do you ever regret leaving your old life?" She paused, considering. "Grief never really leaves. Some nights I still hear the cyclone, still see his face. But regret? No. The choice to start again was the first time I truly lived. Her honesty cut through the dry wind. Jack realized he envied that certainty. Back at the cabin, dusk settled quickly. They shared a simple meal of damper and bush tomatoes. The fire popped softly, throwing shadows on the timber walls. "Tell me about your father," Mara said. Jack hesitated. "He built the firm from nothing. Thinks legacy is everything. I'm supposed to carry it on. We've barely spoken since I left." Mara stirred the coals. "Legacy's a word people hide behind when they're scared of being forgotten." The thought unsettled Jack. He remembered his father's stern eyes, the way every conversation ended with business. He wondered when they'd last spoken as father and son, rather than warden and heir. That night, sleep came fully. Dreams of boardrooms and endless red horizons tangled in his mind. He woke before dawn, heart pounding. Stepping outside, he saw the Southern Cross blazing against the velvet sky. The stars felt ancient, older than every family name, older than every ambition. For the first time, Jack whispered the truth to the night. "I don't know who I am without the firm." The land offered no reply, only the low murmur of wind through ghost gums, a silence that seemed to say, "That's the start." The call home. A week slipped by almost without Jack noticing. Days began with the hush of dawn and ended in skies aflame with sunset. He helped Myra mend fences, fetch water, and haul firewood, muscles growing taut beneath the dry heat. Each task felt like a lesson in patience. Slow, deliberate, with no room for shortcuts. One afternoon, while they patched a section of wire along the ridge, Mara said, "You'll have to speak to him eventually." Jack wiped sweat from his brow. "You mean my father?" She nodded. "You left without a word. Silence can be heavier than any argument." The idea struck a chord of unease. "I wouldn't even know what to say." "Start with the truth," Mara replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's the only thing worth carrying." That night, under a sprawl of stars, Jack turned the thought over like a stone in his hand. His phone had been off since Perth. He switched it on for the first time in weeks. Dozens of missed calls, messages from colleagues, and a single terse text from his father glowed on the screen. "Where are you?" Jack stared until the words blurred. He wanted to hurl the phone into the scrub, but something in Mara's calm insistence rooted him. He typed a single message. "Safe. Need time." Then, after a long pause, "We should talk soon." The reply came minutes later. "Come home when you're ready. No anger, no lecture, just a quiet acknowledgement." The next morning, a cool breeze rolled off the hills, carrying the scent of wet grass. Jack helped Mara tend her small garden, surprised at the simple satisfaction of coaxing green life from red dust. "You've changed," she observed, handing him a spade. "Feels like I'm just starting to see things," Jack said. Myra smiled faintly. "That's the country working on you. But remember, clarity doesn't mean escape. It means choice." Later that day, they hiked to a nearby gorge where rain had filled hidden pools. They swam in silence, water cold enough to sting. Floating on his back, Jack stared up at the sheer cliffs, marveling at how ancient and unmovable they seemed. In their presence, his own turmoil felt small, almost laughable. That night, they sat by the fire as a crescent moon hung low. Myra's voice broke the comfortable quiet. "When you leave, what will you take with you?" Jack considered. "Not much. Just the knowing that I can choose who I am." Mara nodded, satisfied. "Then the land's given you what you came for." Days later, Jack packed his bag. The sky blazed a fierce blue as he stood outside the cabin, unsure how to say goodbye. "Thank you," he said simply. Mara clasped his hand. "The world's bigger than the life you were handed. Don't forget that." He began the long walk back toward the roadhouse, the red dust swirling around his boots. Each step felt heavier, yet clearer. Ahead lay conversations he'd avoided, decisions he could no longer postpone. The land receded behind him, but its lesson, the quiet force of honesty and choice, walked with him like a shadow. Facing the old world, the city air hit Jack like a wall of noise and exhaust. After weeks of wind and silence, Perth felt almost unreal. Glass towers catching the sun, the buzz of traffic, the constant pulse of people in a hurry. He shouldered his pack and walked from the station with a steady rhythm, a fragment of the outback still breathing inside him. His father's office occupied the top floor of a sleek riverside building. The lift ride seemed endless. As the doors slid open, Jack was greeted by the familiar scent of polished wood and strong coffee. Staff glanced up, startled, but said nothing. He crossed the plush carpet and knocked once on the heavy door. "Come in." Patrick Moran looked older than Jack remembered, the lines around his eyes carved deeper. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You're back," his father said at last. "I am," Jack replied. Patrick gestured to a chair. "Sit." Jack stayed standing. "I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because I couldn't breathe." His father's jaw tightened. "The firm is your legacy." "It's your legacy," Jack corrected, voice calm. "I need a life that's mine." Silence stretched between them, thick as the Kimberley heat. At last, Patrick exhaled a long, weary sound. "I built this for you, so you'd never struggle as I did." "And I respect that," Jack said, "but wealth without purpose is just another cage." For a heartbeat, Patrick's eyes softened, a flicker of understanding breaking through years of expectation. "What will you do then?" "I'm not sure yet. Something honest, something that feels real." The older man studied him, then nodded slowly. "Then make it count." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet, but it was a door opening. That evening, Jack walked along the Swan River as dusk painted the water in streaks of rose and violet. He felt the city hum around him, but inside was the quiet of red dust and endless sky. He realized the Outback hadn't merely offered escape, it had given him a compass. He sent a message to Mayra, back in the city. "Thank you for everything." Her reply came quickly. "The land taught you. Remember its silence." Jack smiled, pocketing the phone. The next weeks blurred with small but deliberate steps. He resigned from the firm, declining offers to reconsider. He sold the apartment that had felt like a cage and began volunteering with a community program that taught business skills to remote Indigenous youth. Each day carried the rhythm of work and purpose, a quiet satisfaction that felt more solid than any corporate victory. Yet the greatest shift was within. He no longer feared the emptiness that had once driven him. He welcomed it, knowing it was space for something truer to grow. One evening, while walking home beneath a sky dusted with city stars, Jack paused on the riverbank. The breeze carried the faint scent of rain, and for a heartbeat he was back in the Kimberley, standing beside Mayra, staring at a valley of ghost gums. He closed his eyes and whispered a promise to the red earth. "I will live honest." And in the hush of the river's flow, he felt the land's answer. Not in words, but in the steady certainty of his own heartbeat. The smallest act, the greatest lesson. Months passed, each day quieter and more deliberate than the last. Jack no longer counted success in billable hours or quarterly growth. He measured it in faces and stories. The community program became his full-time work. Traveling to remote towns, mentoring teenagers with bright eyes and restless energy, teaching them how to build small enterprises that honored their culture and land. On a warm spring morning, he drove north to a dusty township where the school's roof rattled in the wind. Among the group of students was a boy named Eli, no more than 15, who rarely met anyone's eyes. Jack recognized the weight of silence in him, a silence he'd once carried himself. During a break, Jack found Eli sketching designs in the dirt with a stick, intricate patterns of kangaroo tracks and river bends. "That's brilliant," Jack said, crouching to see closer. Eli shrugged. "Just something my nan taught me. Doesn't matter." "It matters," Jack replied softly. "Ideas like that can become a business, a story people will pay to hear and see. But more important, it's yours." For the first time, the boy looked up. "You reckon?" "I know," Jack said, and meant it. The conversation lasted only minutes, but Jack felt its weight. It wasn't a grand gesture, not the kind of triumph his old life celebrated, yet it pulsed with the quiet power of possibility, the same power he'd discovered in the Outback's red silence. That night, back in Perth, Jack sat on his small balcony overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered like distant stars, but he no longer felt caged by them. He took out the battered journal he'd carried across the desert and began to write. Sometimes the greatest lesson hides in a single choice: to step away, to listen, to begin again. He paused, letting the words breathe. A notification pinged. It was a message from Mayra. "The land remembers you." Jack smiled. He could almost smell eucalyptus and iron-rich dust. He typed back, "I remember it too. Thank you." Weeks later, he received a call from his father. "I've been thinking," like Patrick said, voice gruff but warm. "Your work with those kids. Your mother would have been proud." Jack swallowed the sudden knot in his throat. "Thanks, Dad." A pause. Then, "Dinner next week? No talk of the firm. Just Dinner. Jack agreed, a quiet peace settling over him. Bridges, he realized, didn't always burn. Sometimes they simply waited for the right time to be crossed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack closed the journal and looked west, toward the memory of endless plains and sky. The outback had not given him wealth or easy answers. It had given him something far rarer: the courage to choose a life shaped by honesty, purpose, and the small acts that ripple far beyond what the eye can see. He understood now that the greatest lesson was not in leaving or staying, but in recognizing that a single genuine choice, one quiet moment of truth, could change everything. The cicadas of memory hummed in his ears, and Jack whispered to the night, "Thank you." The river carried his words into the dark, where they joined the timeless song of the land. The big lesson. The smallest act of courage, stepping away from a life built on expectations, can open the way to real purpose. It isn't wealth or status that lasts. It's the quiet impact of living true, of helping others find their own path.